Oh, good evening, this is Hamlock T wishing you a very pleasant evening. And here's a little piece about your friend of mine, George Soros. And this is about George Soros. And, you know, he is a rich guy and he just loves to go shopping. He loves to buy things. And what has he been buying this time? He has been buying the European Court of Human Rights. The credibility of that court is now absolutely in tatters. As of the 100 judges, there are 100 judges and 22, and they had received funding from the Open Foundation Society or Amnesty International, and some of them to such a point that they were little more than a wholly owned subsidiary of the Open Society Foundation. And so what this means, that those judges, all of their decisions were absolutely biased in favour of George Soros's held opinion on human rights. And the influence that this man holds is absolutely incredible. I mean, to have a court of that level, and you know, basically, when you talk about human rights judgment, you have to have a high moral standard, and you have to be completely unbiased. And to say that a quarter of the judges, I mean, that is not a small amount. You know, when you are talking about, you know, when votes are swayed by one particular vote, left or right, on the outcome of a court case about human rights. And so here you have George Soros deciding, you know, basically if this person is of the wrong political background, for example, or doesn't support the ideas that George Soros supports, or is a threat to George Soros and his Open Society, you know, then he talks to the judges, and guess what? The decision is swayed from one way to the other. Now, I'm going to read this entire piece, and it's quite a long piece, so I'm going to just switch over to that right now, but I'm also going to link down below a video by Amazing Polly, and she talks about how Ukraine basically is owned, the government I mean, by George Soros, and how he has bought central key figures in that government to be able to influence the outcome of decisions and the decision-making process. Okay, so with no further ado, let's pop over to this article, and I'll come back and do a very quick wrap-up. Okay, here we go. And this from RT. Credibility of European Court of Human Rights lies in ruins after judges' links to Soros revealed. And this is by John Laughlin. John Laughlin, who has a doctorate in philosophy from the University of Oxford and who has taught at universities in Paris and Rome, is a historian and specialist in international affairs. And here he is. A study by the European Centre for Law and Justice in Strasbourg has revealed several conflicts of interest between judges at the European Court of Human Rights and NGOs funded by George Soros. The European Centre for Law and Justice is an NGO which often appears at the court to campaign on social, family and religion-related issues. I am proud to be listed as a research fellow at the ECLJ, but in reality I have written only one article for the Centre's website, and I received no salary from it. I had no role in writing the report. The study found that out of 100 judges who served on the bench of the European Court of Human Rights in the period between 2009 and 2019, nearly a quarter, 22, have strong links to George Soros's Open Society Foundation or to NGOs like Amnesty International and others which are funded by it. Human Rights Watch, for instance, has received $100 million from the Open Society Foundation since 2010. Some of the NGOs receive so much of their budget from Soros that they are in fact wholly owned subsidiaries of his foundation. The links between the judges and the NGOs are substantial. They've included working for years as members of the board of directors or executive council of these NGOs, having teaching posts at institutions funded by them, being a salaried director of programs for the Open Society Foundation or associated NGOs, and undertaking other forms of paid work for them. The full list of these links can be found on pages 7 and 8 of the report. A good example is that of Bulgarian Yanko Grozev, who, as leader of the Open Society Justice Initiative, defended the Pussy Riot case against Russia in 2018 before being elected as a judge of the court shortly thereafter. The study does not include less formal forms of collaboration with NGOs, such as occasional work for them. See note 15 of the report. This means that the links are even greater than those specifically addressed in the study. The report also covers other human rights officers, such as the Commissioners for Human Rights at the Council of Europe from 2012 to 2018, who does not sit as a judge, but who was for years a salaried activist for the Open Society Foundation in Latvia, and who had used his official position to campaign against the so-called anti-Soros legislation in Hungary. These NGOs are extremely active at the ECHR. The Helsinki Foundation for Human Rights in Poland filed 16 applications and defended 32 cases in 2017 alone. Very often the role played by the NGOs does not appear in the court's records, but has to be discovered from the NGO's own reports instead. For instance, the case can be defended by lawyers from one NGO with pleas heard from another NGO as third parties, even though the other organisations are in fact financed by the same source as the applicant, usually Soros. There would not be anything wrong with judges having exercised a salaried activity for an NGO prior to becoming a judge if these same organisations were not themselves active as parties who bring cases to the EHCR, either as applicants themselves, as lawyers for applicants, or as third parties giving supposedly expert evidence, but in reality lobbying for a cause. And if those judges did not then hear those cases, indeed the report's worst finding is that in 88 cases judges sat on the bench ruling on cases brought to the court by NGOs they had previously worked for, without declaring a conflict of interest and without withdrawing from hearing the case. In one case ruled on in 2018, 10 out of the 14 NGOs that had brought the cases were funded by the Open Society Foundation, while 6 of the 17 judges who heard the case themselves had links to the same Soros-funded group. The judge's refusal to withdraw is a disgraceful professional failing which shows that Europe's supreme human rights body is not in fact independent, but it is instead part of a veritable human rights industry, a pyramid of money and a tight network of professional relationships, at the top of which sits George Soros with his billions. NGOs are supposed to represent civil society, independent of states. In reality, a very large number of them are the creation of actors with no democratic legitimacy, like the Open Society Foundation. The fact that this corrupt system has been able to flourish has several causes. The first is that Soros and the NGOs he finances dominate the human rights industry across the Balkans and in the Baltic states. His millions flood these small, poor countries. He has spent $131 million in Albania since 1992, for instance. And they in turn appoint judges to the ECR, which rules on human rights issues for the 47 member states of the Council of Europe. Indeed, the report finds that the total spending of the Open Society Foundation in Europe, $90 million a year, actually exceeds the annual budget of the European Court of Human Rights, $70 million a year. Second, new procedures introduced in 2012 specifically provide for NGOs to take part in the selection procedure for judges at the ECHR. These NGOs can propose candidates and they can lobby for their selection. They have done this on many occasions, as the report shows. In the case of Albania in 2018, for instance, 2 out of the 3 candidates were executives on the Open Society Foundation. One of them was elected. Finally, there is no requirement that people appointed to be judges at the ECHR have any judicial experience at all. Some 51 out of the 100 judges who have sat on the ECHR bench since 2009 have never been judges or magistrates before. Instead, they were very often human rights activists working for Soros or one of his front organizations. This is a structural weakness which also affects international war crimes tribunals. As I showed in my book Travesty, it means that people can wield judicial power who are not in fact trained judges or magistrates or even necessarily lawyers, but instead political activists. In some very egregious cases, people have become judges on the benches of these tribunals without even having a law degree. The result is that the judges who sit on these bodies do not in fact behave as judges should. The role of the judge is to say what the law is, not to say what he or she thinks the law should be. Unfortunately, this is exactly what judges at the ECHR and at the new international tribunals do. In 1978, the ECHR proclaimed that the convention was a living instrument which must be interpreted in the light of present-day conditions. Oh my freaking God! And that therefore its judges had the right to read new things into the convention instead of agreeing to be bound by it. Such judicial activism is a travesty of the rule of law. It is a travesty because the areas in which ECHR judges exercise their judicial activism are precisely the most politically sensitive issues which should properly be decided by politicians in elected parliaments or by referenda, and not by an elite caste of unaccountable activists. These areas include freedom of expression, asylum, LGBT rights, conditions of detention, minority rights, and so on. Using their freedom to make up the law, ECHR judges have over decades applied a new vision of man which is the opposite of the original intention of the convention, which was to protect human beings and their families from abusive state power. Now the ECHR spends most of its time demanding more state power for this or that fashionable woke cause. George Soros has long been attacked for the excessive political power his gigantic fortune has bought, especially in post-communist Eastern Europe. This report by the European Centre for Law and Justice is, however, one of the first occasions in which the corrupting effect of that power has been scrupulously identified and documented with respect to the supreme body charged with protecting human rights in Europe. To date, the ECHR has not denied any of the facts outlined in the report, and to the extent that these facts cannot be denied because they come from the ECHR itself, its credibility as an independent judicial body now lies in ruins. So this really shows you how entwined all of these things are, and how long this has been going on, and these avenues, these tentacles, these threads of connection between officials here and there who were maybe backed at a lower level, and they were followed up the ladder, and they are now beholden, and they are influence peddlers within those systems. And so it means that no system is safe, and you don't know where these people are, you don't know what. Well, look at the mess in Ukraine. Look at the political mess in Ukraine, and a lot of this is caused by conflict created by these sleepers, these people who are put in there to hold a political ideology point of view and to move in every way possible towards that point of view. So this is the most subversive kind of interference, and it happens at all levels of governments, organizations, corporations. This man George Soros has his fingers in every pie, and because he has made such a long-term investment, you can rest yourself assured that these things will continue on long after George Soros has left this mortal coil. If you've liked this video, please like, comment and subscribe below, and please share. Let's beat the YouTube algorithm. Like and share, send this forward, put it into playlists, whatever you can to share this video. As I said, I'm moving over to Bitchute as well, so I'm doing like a double uploading, and that way at least these videos will be preserved for whatever end that might be. But anyways, I enjoy rooting out these stories and bringing them to you, and trying to balance out the agenda against globalism. I have come to dislike globalism so much and seen it as an absolute threat to our civilization because it is so totalitarian. It yields to nothing and to no one. Anyway, in the meantime, this is Hound Dog Steve signing off, wishing you a very pleasant evening. You take care now. See ya. Bye.